Good afternoon. It's a pleasure welcoming Dr. Ismail Sezgin to talk on Fethullah Gulen's approach to interfaith dialogue. Dr. Ismail Sezgin, born and raised in Istanbul, Turkey, was awarded his PhD at Leeds Beckett University on the subject of moral responsibility in contemporary Islam. He is a research assistant in religion and society, Regent's Park College, Oxford, and a postdoctoral researcher at the Center for Governance, Leadership, Global Responsibility at Leeds Business School. Dr. Sezgin's research expertise and interests in relation to political Islam, extremism, ethics, and religious movements have led him to speaking speaking at conferences internationally and offering comments and interviews on various media platforms, including the BBC's Hardtalk. Dr. Sezgin is also co-founder of the Center for Hizmet Studies, a London-based non-profit organization providing information, research, analysis, and critique on the Hizmet Movement, a civil society grassroots movement originating out of Turkey and active in over 160 countries worldwide. You're welcome, Mr. Sezgin. It's you have up to 2 hours for this session. It's totally up to you, however you like to conduct it. So over to you, sir.
Thank you very much for a nice introduction. And what time is it there for you, mostly in India? Is it
3 p.m. now?
3 p.m. So
yes.
Good afternoon. We just had our breakfast in here in the UK. So we're going to cover, let me share the screen. Okay. Okay, that's going to be strange. Okay. Yeah, that's good. I think you can see the entire screen now. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. We're going to talk about the dialogue perspective of Fethullah Gulen specifically. That's part of my thesis, so I will be specifically talking. But one of the problems is Gulen is not very much separate from the movement that formed around him, the Hizmet movement. So all the ideas that he brought has been interpreted by the Hizmet movement. They are not often or always same. They are sometimes slightly different. So I'll try to highlight how the idea is formulated and sometimes why it is implemented differently. So we'll see in a way, we'll see jumping through between two practical issues and an ideological point of view. And I'll also talk how it is formed. So I want to start with, first of all, like define the dialogue, the dialogue for Fethullah Gulen. But I want to first clear out some misconception within the Hizmet movement and how they interpreted that, which is not. So dialogue often strikes to people as a promotion of Hizmet movement, because if you were to meet with someone who follows the ideas of Fethullah Gulen, you may get the impression that he's actually promoting the movement he's in. And often many people does that. So in practice in England, in different places, you can see that there has been a lot of promotional activity in the form of dialogue. So it is actually trying to talk about Hizmet movement rather than engaging a dialogue the way Gulen formulated. Sometimes it can be seen as the person is promoting the Gulen or his ideas, and this might be part of dialogue. It might be in the form of a book, in a leaflet, in a presentation, but actually the one person promoting to his audience Fethullah Gulen or his ideas. And there was a time when it used to be dialogue was a promotion of Turkey or Turkish culture via the schools that they have had around the world, or in other ways, like taking people for trips. So these are all normally an integral part of the dialogue, but this has been taken out of context by the people and misunderstood and misconstrued. So I'll try to go back to what is really dialogue according to Gulen now, and then we'll see how it can be useful to see this misconception and their the way they come to emerge. So if we were to talk about the dialogue, is first of all, it's about all the people of different beliefs, and so of course Fethullah Gulen is a religious scholar, is a Muslim scholar. When he engages in dialogue, it is often easy to perceive that dialogue as interfaith dialogue because he's a man of faith, and often what he meets to do that dialogue is another man of faith, and everyone can easily think that as an interfaith dialogue. But it's not intended to be necessarily exclusively interfaith dialogue. It's just he's a man of faith. If he was a political leader, that would have been probably a political dialogue because he is a political personality and others. But it doesn't stop in the theory, in his writings. The dialogue is more about really anyone, in between anyone, not necessarily even a matter of belief. It can be in any method that mutually interests parties. It's about exchanging ideas, learning from each other. It's also it also has an element of willingness. You shouldn't be forcing others to accept anything, or they shouldn't be forcing you to accept anything. In fact, it's a bit about learning about the other person, or he or she learns about you, so you can actually mutually coexist or understand each other better. For instance, nowadays it is Christmas in this country, and if you don't know what it means and why people are celebrating, how it started and how it turned into a different culture, let's say, then you may find yourself out of it. You may not understand and respect and appropriately behave, or overreact or underreact, don't see the importance of it, and try to get some business done during the Christmas days, because you don't know, or you haven't engaged in a dialogue. You don't know about your partners or your people you are living with. So it is about understanding each other's ideas and beliefs and culture. It's also, if there is any outcome, it is about to agree to live together, to coexist together. I don't know, these seems like a foundation, but there are a couple more stuff. For instance, if you manage to understand each other and each other's sensitivities, for instance, what you do and how the other person perceives that, how they understand whether they are, they are with you on that matter or not, or they can tolerate that matter, whether you can live together without stepping each other's toes or without insulting each other, then you may actually move further, and actually you can create a platform via that dialogue and to cooperate, to work cooperation to solve some of the common problems, because often we have common problems. Before this, we have like really global problems, but we have never felt it the way we did now with the COVID, for instance, that it made us a single community. In terms of COVID, everyone is on the same page. You can see world's most authoritarian regimes like China and, let's say, North Korea and some Middle Eastern countries, and the world's best democracies. They are all trying to deal with the same problem, almost with the similar tools. Everyone is expecting one of the world corporations to find a vaccine or a cure or a medicine, and it becomes a household matter. So there is a common platform. We can actually come together and engage in certain problems together. If you see, for instance, if everyone goes into lockdown, but let's say some of the countries or some of the population doesn't, it doesn't help. So in a way, you can see some of the problems can be only solved through cooperation. So there are other problems, of course, especially in our local areas. Dialogue is actually, in a way, a tool to understand each other, appreciate what is common in terms of problems or commonalities or differences, and understand each other so we can respect. Also, if possible, we can actually work together to solve a problem like ignorance, poverty, and discrimination. So, but dialogue in a way is an engagement with others, more or less. It is not only about talking with others, it's about how you engage with others and how you learn from others and how you try to solve problems with others together, because you need everyone's contribution. Is it so far clear? Is there any there is not, it doesn't seem a lot of groundbreaking theories in here. Anyone wants to comment so far? Let me see. Everyone is on the same page. I'm checking the video feed. Yeah. No comment? That's okay. I'll keep asking, so just bear with me. So why then Gulen's dialogue understanding is important? So I think there is two reasons why we should take it as an important contribution from a Muslim point of view. One is his emphasis on what we call the word temsil, representation. So often when we understand dialogue, and when we hear the word dialogue from a religious point of view, it's often, even for Vatican, it's often a form of mission, meaning like, I will tell you how superior my religion is. Yeah, dialogue means I'm going to explain to you what you don't understand about our ways, and I will convert you if possible. So, I mean, it's not always like that, but not too long ago, 20, 30 years ago, I think when Vatican was trying to reform their dialogue approach, dialogue means mission for the biggest religion in the world. For them, dialogue means actually converting others into Christianity. And this is same for Muslims as well. When you talk, when a Muslim engages in dialogue, there is somewhere back of his mind that I want to pass on what I know. What I know is Islam, so I will talk about it. I'll explain it. I'll try to convince you. But Gulen brought the importance of temsil. Actually, this shaped the movement a lot as well. Temsil is representation. What he says is that there is no lack of information. You can Google something and find the information there. Everyone can find information on Google, or asking people, or reading books. It's not the way it used to be. What is scarce, what is lacking, is the representation of that information. No one is actually acting out on that information. So you should go out and do whatever your religion tells you to do. Meaning, like, for instance, our religion employs us to solve the humanity's problems because we are vicegerents of God. We are representative of God. We are Khalifa of God, meaning if God wanted to fix some of the problems, he sent his ambassador on earth in the human form, so that humans solve all those problems on his behalf. So people should act that out. And how can you act that out? Well, you can decide what is the biggest problems, and you try to solve those problems. And at the end of the day, you have solved some of the problems. And by this way, you engage with other people. So this is the second part of it. It requires the engagement. You can't just act out like a theater play. You have to go out and sit together with people and try to define what is the common problem in that area and try to resolve that. And that is the way of telling even the best way of telling your religion is acting it out. So that's why I named this presentation as talking through action. That's Fethullah Gulen's perspective. It's not talking as dialogue, it's actually acting out as dialogue. So I think within Islamic interpretation, many people, or majority of Muslims, would agree that Islam is a missionary religion. It actually wants to expand. You need to tell people about to expand. But very few Islamic movements or Islamic scholars emphasize on the importance of actually the practicing out what you believe to be the best. And that's what, not necessarily propagating about it. Okay. So I'm assuming so far so clear. You can intervene and at least ask for any clarification if it doesn't make sense. Yeah. So there are some principles of dialogue. At this point, I want to talk about some of them.
Uh,
So
uh, Dr.
yeah,
Ismail, if I get it correct, the tamsil means that implementation of the values, practice.
yeah,
But basically, Islam emphasizes that we need to practice the values in our own lives. Is it similar to that tamsil that we
yes.
need to implement and practice?
Representation. I take it as representation of what you believe,
Okay.
but acting it out. Yeah, is Gulen said, for instance, specifically emphasizing on this. I think I can't remember which book it was it, but people are their ears are full, but their eyes are hungry. So, like for instance, many people write at the back of their cars, Islam is the great solution of every problem. You
Okay.
don't need to write or say that. You can just solve a problem as a Muslim, and that is a way of saying the same thing in a much powerful way. So you can solve a problem like ignorance, poverty, discrimination, the things that are affecting. These are all the ideas that actually formulate the Hizmet movement, and it's working around the education, dialogue, and charity activities, because actually they identified some common problems and they are trying to work around those problems. And in their mind, this is the way of talking about Islam rather than talking about it, just acting it out, how Muslims should be charitable, how they should solve problems, how they should engage others to learn. So that is, at least in Turkey, it's very rare. Many people are very keen on speaking about Islam, assuming that the other people doesn't know about it. Gulen, as a Muslim scholar, of course, interested in spreading Islam, but what he says is you shouldn't spread the word, you should spread the deed. You should show them the fruit, and you should temsil rather than tabligh. That's the comparison. Is it
Okay.
temsil or tabligh? Tabligh is
Okay.
essential,
Yeah.
mission they're telling about. But Gulen says, well, there is enough of that. People can easily find any information they need on the internet, on the books. It's
Mhm.
not it's not like 10 centuries ago, but they can't see any Muslims really
Right.
acting out their religion. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank
So the principles of dialogue, according to Gulen, is learning and enriching yourself. This, I'm not saying these are all very well represented and practiced by the Hizmet movement, but I can say Gulen himself has really learned and enriched himself through these practices. For instance, as someone who was born and raised in Turkey, he had some misconceptions about, let's say, Catholics, Vatican, and this and that, like many of us has, for instance, like Western powers trying to dominate, or recently people think like they're going to inject microchips to our body via the vaccines and stuff. You have all those of that sort of misconceptions. So, like many Muslim scholars or Muslims in Turkey, there was in his mind there was a perception of Vatican as being a hostile force against Islam, but it changed over the time when he met with Christians and the Pope and other people, and of course when he see the wider world that what they are dealing really, it's not what we call Christian is not Christian as well. They have the same problems. They can't get enough people into churches. People are not practicing anymore. So you can see he changed some of his ideas. He become more empathetic, more appreciative, more cooperative. When he moved to America, for instance, some of his ideas about various issues has changed. They are detailed. So you can see the engagement actually enriches his ideas. So it should be. It's not about one-way stream. You should actually learn by engaging in dialogue. You should learn about yourself as well. So learning about others is one of the best ways of doing that. For instance, if you don't know what Christians, and I'm of course talking interfaith terms, but it can be non-faith people as well. If you don't know the sensitivities, the belief system, the way people think and act in a certain community, you can't navigate your way. And when you learn about that, you also realize what you do different. Many people don't know what they exactly believe until they actually face with another person and his belief, and then they realize, oh, actually, this is this way in my belief. I, sort of. Otherwise, for instance, majority of Turkish Muslims, for instance, in this day and age, they would think the Christmas is 1st of January. So, like New Year Eve and the Christmas is the same, and Noel is the same as well. So what are, like, because they have never really engaged with someone and they don't know what really Christmas means, and it's in a way Milad Nabi for them, like they celebrate the birth of Jesus and this and that, but it's a different perception because they never learned about it anyway. So it's another principle in there is respect for everyone. It's a difficult one because there is two terms in this Gulen use. One of them is acceptance, to accept people as they are because they are representative of God, they are Khalifa to God, they are vicegerents of the God on earth, they have a free will, they can implement that, Allah will judge them, you have to just accept them, they are equal as you are before God. And of course, there is difficult issues that you wouldn't do yourself, you wouldn't, let's say, adopt that sort of ways, you find outright wrong from the beginning, then you have to learn to tolerate that. So the concept of tolerance. Some people think that tolerance is a bit degrading, like, why do you have to tolerate me? I am a homosexual, so does it require, why can't you accept me? But I would see it's a different tool. If you can't accept something, you can at least tolerate it because it's not your place to judge that. So I would say it's a different tool for Gulen in the toolbox. But some people really have strong arguments about how degrading the word tolerance means, and it should be acceptance and whatever. But I can say Gulen has both for different occasions. One other principle of dialogue is actually focusing on commonalities instead of differences. Because, like the way he formulates is, you can talk about the differences many hours and it won't get you anywhere. You will still have those differences. It's a good exercise to know how different we are. But if you focus on commonalities, meaning like common problems, common issues that, for instance, we may not agree about the form of Jesus, but we agree that our streets are littered and unemployment is rising and youth social problems. So when we talk about common issues, we may actually get to somewhere at the end of the month, if you do small actions together, rather than every time we come together and discuss, like for centuries and centuries, these beliefs and perspectives are different. We may not actually, make a lot of way about that, but we can focus on common issues, that local or global problems, and we can solve some of them. So these are some of the principles, and I'm sure there might be said more, and I might be saying some other stuff in different places can be added as a principle here, but I'm going to cover some other aspects. Is that so far so good? Or okay, moving on to importance of dialogue. So Gulen doesn't only say that, because in 1990s, when he come out with this idea of engaging with others, he took initiative and talked to the other religious representatives of, let's say, in Turkey, there is Jewish people, Christians, Orthodox Christians, Catholic Christians, and minority Islamic groups like Alevites and, like one form of Shia Muslims and stuff. So he was trying to make an argument about the importance of dialogue. So one of his argument is it's a necessity for every Muslim. It is a zarurat. It is essential because, the Prophet had always engaged in dialogue. 99% of his time, he was talking to people out of his religion, trying to tell the message. If they accept, fine. If not, form an agreement and live together with them. There are so many agreements he made with, let's say, Christians of Yemen and polytheists of different tribes and this and that. He formed a way of mutually coexisting. He had the Medina agreement with Jewish and non-believers of Medina people. So he engages all the time with people. It's a necessity. It's also if you realize it, whether you do it or not, you are always engaging in dialogue. For instance, when you're moving through a corridor and there is a cleaning lady, and you either say hi, salam, whatever, hello, or not. If you engage in a nice, courteous way, the woman will have an opinion of you, how you perceive her, whether you look down or up, or you engage nicely or not. Or if you ignore, like as if she doesn't exist there, that will create a perception. So there is two human beings. One is saying, I don't see you there, I don't recognize you there, I don't even consider you as a human to be, recognized. In our religion, giving salam is essential. By not giving, you are making a statement as well. So either way, you are engaging. So why not do in a positive engagement? Why not always be careful and engage people in a positive way? Because if you don't care about common problems, that means you're apolitical, you're not interested, you don't contribute, and whatever, all this sort of is. And the importance of the second part is he emphasized on that there is a lot of stereotyping and prejudice growing in the world. And nowadays, of course, it was in the 90s a different issue, but after 2000, after 9/11 attacks as well, there is an increasing prejudice against Islam or homosexuals or Jews or different people that, like however you take in we are growing, we are becoming a global, we are connected in many more ways, but people actually are polarizing towards each other. In America, it came to a brink of civil war between Democrats and Republicans. So it is increasing, the stereotyping, like, the way we perceive Trump supporters, or the way Trump supporters perceive Democratic Party supporters and stuff, like they steal the election, this and that. They're all stereotyping, a lot of prejudices there. And that is being fed with social media as well nowadays. But it's very important for real people to get to know one another, for Democrats to have some friends about, Republicans and vice versa, so that actually they understand the reality of the matter, so they don't rely on too much on the stereotypes that is pumped by the media. So the other reason he says is the globalization forced us to live together. Now, like let's say a century ago, people in a land used to be one or two different tribes, unless they are in Istanbul or in London or in a big city. You wouldn't know in a small town of, like a different kind, different color people. But now we are all everywhere, in the movies, increasingly in the work setting, in the Zoom meetings, and everywhere we go, it's much more diverse. So now you are living together. You have to know each other's cultures and traditions to properly appreciate what you do, or how to live together. So the globalization of the population forces cultures to come together, which forces us which makes it important for us to know about those cultures. And this was an important point. At that time, there was a big fear. Now, people are not talking about that anymore, but it was this clash of civilizations paradigm, or the theory, where it was suggested that certain Eastern and Western civilizations are bound to clash again. There might be another war between, let's say, Muslims and others, and whatever. Sort of that, in a way, the one way to avoid that, if there is such a threat that scientists are perceiving, it's much more important to engage in dialogue. And this is the last one. Many of us assume that this dialogue should be done, let's say, international actors like United Nations and this and that. No, not really. It's very much relying on people. People engaging with other people is the best form of dialogue, and you can't rely the governments or international organizations to create a peaceful environment on behalf of us. You have to engage yourself. You have to force your way, sometimes individually, sometimes via actors like Amnesty International or different bodies, and they're forcing them. So I want to, at this point, to talk about what dialogue is not, according to Gulen, because he is also trying to talk about what it is not. So he says it's not necessarily it's not necessarily interrelations or interfaith. That's wrong. So I meant probably like a intercultural or interfaith. I don't know how it is, how it came there. But it's between people. We have to assume it's not an organizational relationship. It is me knowing another person, that person knowing me, having friendship and able to work together in a work setting or in a project together. And these are some of them is because of him being a religious figure in Turkey, the way he come out and speak or engage with people with his level or his caliber or his type makes it look like it is interfaith dialogue. But it is not exclusively interfaith dialogue. It's like it's about all matters. It's not religious matters only. It's mainly actually mostly social matters. And then again, it's not a way of looking for a synthesis between religions and making a mixture or this and that, or like, okay, how much we can compromise. It's not a search for that. In fact, it's a search for learning and respect. So we want people to respect when we are fasting, well, to a certain degree, let's say. And probably they might be wanting people to respect some of the Christmas traditions, like, let's say, not I have seen once in London that people don't appreciate shops being open in the Christmas because it doesn't feel festive enough. Like everything should shut down and everything, or that was the perception of one or two people I have met at that time. But what I'm saying is there are cultural sensitivities, and we're not trying to create a synthesis of different ideas. He says it's about learning and what we can do to respect it. How can we avoid stepping your toes? And he says it's not reactionary. It's not because there is a problem. We have to be proactive about that. Like, why not get to know one another? It is a Quranic principle. Quran asks us to get to know one another, so that Allah created all different tribes and nations so that we get to know one another. Allah wants us to get to know one another as well. Is that okay so far? Or are you bored already? Shall I speed it up, the rest of it? Okay. So you may have heard a lot of these issues, but anyway. So let's say, what sort of a person, this is the other part, like the person who is engaging in dialogue, what sort of qualities he should be trying to establish with himself. Okay. After this, I'll give some practical examples, and we can move on to Q&A. So he might be the person willing to lead in a good deed, starting something, initiate, or at least take part. This is very easy. There are a lot of good causes around us. We often, when we say dialogue or something, we think like we have to initiate something. No, you don't have to initiate something. You can just join Amnesty and support the causes. There are so many causes that you can support. The person should be willing to either initiate something that he needs, he thinks that it's needed to be done. If we see a problem around us in the world, it means like we think there should be a solution for something, then maybe we should initiate a project to start some or take part. He said he should be transparent and open towards others. You should be clear about what your aims are. You may want to say, well, I'm a Muslim, and I want to know about Christianity. Not that I'm interested in conversion, but I just moved here and I want to know about your church, whatever. So being open, doesn't mean any, transparent, and then they can appreciate it better. Not having a hidden motivation. And it said, it should be, the person should be self-motivated for good. He's willing to do good deeds, not necessarily reacting to a racist attack or something, which is not bad, but reactionary actions doesn't last long. So the person should be motivated to do good things, do good contributions. And it says the person who engages in dialogue should be merciful. The Quranic terms is kavli layyin. He should know how to use the nice language meaning like soft language. He should be familiar with those two, because in the Quranic teachings, God asked Moses to talk to the tyrant of the time, the Pharaoh, in the best way possible. So if the prophet was urged to talk to the most horrible person on the world with the kavli layin, with a soft, tongue, then we should adopt that all the time as possible. Many people are more worthy of that sort of a language because they're not as horrible. They haven't killed so many kids and this and that. You see, like that person was a very horrible tyrant, but even talking with him should be in a soft expression. So it's also an important spiritual aspect, but the person who is engaging in dialogue should have the concept of ihsan, which means like we have two concepts similar, but one is ikhlas, to do everything for the sake of Allah that He asked us to do so, and only expect reward from Him and this and that. This is ikhlas. This is of course given, everyone knows, but the Gulen emphasizes on the fact that you should be always conscious that Allah is watching you. He is aware of what you're doing. This is the other side. Always act as if someone there is watching and observing you. That makes us often a different person, isn't it? When no one is around, we may be slightly different. But if you always remember Allah is there, watching over us, and if we manage to remember that, that has an impact in our civil behavior, let's say. And also he says, not looking for any benefits or any worldly outcomes for your personal self, for greater good, fine, but not being selfish in terms of, like, you want to get to a position, you need to have so many friends in different circles, that's why you are engaging in dialogue. This is not the right way, according to Gulen, let's say. So in terms of practice, these are, for instance, like the stuff that I observed in England mainly, where those dialogue activities, what they used to do in dialogue society, for instance, or in different places. There are really, really good organized activities like open days, mosques or different cultural centers and stuff, inviting people to get to know, giving them an opportunity to ask their questions. There is, a good way of workplace dialogue initiations to do successful I can't exactly remember the details of every, but there is a manual somewhere. They even actually formalize how to effectively do that. So creating some workshops to discuss issues, to get to know better. The cultural fairs, the cultural trips, they're very important. Like that's how people actually misunderstand. It's not about promotion of Turkey, but if you want really someone to really understand you, it's, if possible, it's a good to take that person to your culture, because you're in his culture, you know about the culture, let's say, and if that person sees your culture, where you come from, it will put everything into a better perspective. It will enrich that person about you, and then you can have a much successful relationship. And of course, food is an important aspect of dialogue, like, organizing dinners, Christmas dinners, or Ashura, this Islamic dish. Well, actually, it is in Judeo-Christian tradition as well. Many prophets had important stuff on that 10th of Muharram. I think the Jews are still celebrating that in a different way. And some of the activities, and it's a pudding. Noah, according to legend, the prophet Noah has landed on a mountain after the flood, and he celebrated that with a dish by putting everything together. So that's a common point that you can actually remember and share, and it's been done in here. There, of course, some research events like this, training like this, or conferences, seminars, roundtable discussions. And of course, out participation. As I said, you don't have to always do things. It's much easier to just look on Eventbrite and different places and see what's happening, what good people are trying to do, and how can I support that? So this is also outreach. You don't have to organize anything. You go and participate and meet with new people, engage in dialogue, attend events, support good causes and everything, without doing any work at all, but still being the most crucial part of that activity, because you are attending and supporting. And most recently, of course, COVID-19 awareness, the issues that are being looking after the vulnerable. I can see a lot of activities in introducing the new people, like into this new settings. And old people nowadays learning their ways about Zoom and meeting on Zoom and everything, but it wasn't the case before. So there is a lot of YouTube and online activities, which is seems like a good, easy way to do that. For instance, I wonder, for instance, 2-3 years ago, whether people would think about like inviting other people from Skype or Zoom to participate talk. I bet this year you had much more diverse speakers than previous years, because now it is a norm to have an online speaker. Normally we wouldn't prefer that because it's not same as being there. Okay, this is the end of my presentation. Yes.
Right, anybody with any questions or comment?
They say go and look after your daughter. She's supposed to be in an art and craft session. It's amazing, the Zoom, while you're thinking about your question, I'll do some filibustering. She's supposed to be in an arts and crafts Zoom meeting. So they sent a package. She's gonna do some arts and crafts, but at home there should be someone supervising it. So that's me. Anyway, any questions? It was so clear. No rooms for any question. Yeah, that often is the case. In that case, what shall we do?
Javed Safi has a question.
Okay.
Please. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, sir. Good afternoon.
Hello. Good afternoon.
Thank you. I'm Javed from Kabul, Afghanistan. And sorry, I joined 10 minutes late, but I catch the main point. And I have one question about clash of civilization. Would you give a little bit more clarification on that? That how does this affect dialogue?
It was a very famous. I don't know how much of the audience would know, but I think in 1990s, especially after the collapse of Soviet Union, the way the world knew the hostility between Soviets and Americans has ended. So there has been a period where people were trying to guess what will be the next conflict in front of the world. Who was that? Samuel Huntington came up with this clash of civilizations. He made an argument, as far as I can remember. It was a big deal before, pre-COVID world, pre-terrorism as well, pre-postmodern terrorism incidents as well. But in a way, that terrorism incident proven that to be wrong, that to be right. So they predicted that Islam will come into clash with Western civilization. That's going to be the next fight. Whether this is a self-fulfilling prophecy or not, because there has been already investment in Afghanistan, for instance, in Taliban and against Russia, Soviets and this and that armament. So all those people, for instance, formed the Al-Qaeda and stuff. So that grew and caused 9/11, and later the Iraqi invasion caused ISIS to emerge in Abu Ghraib and this and that, prison conditions, loads of tortures and everything, reactions. So now we have ISIS as well as others and this and that. So it looks like, or it used to look like, or the idea was that somehow the Western civilization, probably Western Europe and North America meant, will have to fight with Muslims. And it's a growing danger. That's, in a nutshell, I think that was the theory. It's not a long paper. I remember reading it, but at that time we used to discuss a lot, but it looks so distant now. And for Muslims like Fethullah Gulen and others, to be on the receiving end of almost like the world's all nuclear powers except China, Pakistan and India, every other nuclear power is planning a war against Muslims. It looked like that as well. So there is an inevitable clash of civilizations coming up. So it is a scary scenario where, however you take it, whether it's it's this new Cold War or World War, whatever you take it, it's scary and dangerous. So some people wanted to avert even the possibility, because the argument was these are like against each other, the values are so different and this and that, and it had to clash. And it made some historical arguments about it as well. But so that was one of the motivations in dialogue. It's like if you think that something bad will happen, you feel like maybe I should do something to stop it. And well, somewhere in Gulen's philosophy there is a mention of that sort of problems. Well, theoretically speaking, if you were to remove that, would Gulen give up on idea of dialogue? No, it's not essential. But what he says is, well, we have to do all this, but you see there is this threat that they are saying that are emerging, so it makes it more important. That's how the prioritization of the argument. So we have to do this because we're Muslims, we have to engage in dialogue, and these are the religious reasons and this and that. But they also say that a clash of civilization is emerging, and one way to stop is to engage in a positive way. So it's important because of that threat. Yeah, I hope that was.
Well, can I say something? Unlike this theory, I think that clash of civilization is not a proper word, I think, because when we see history, like civilization merged in each other, like they accepted, like we have a lot of civilization merged in each other. And behind the scenes of war, which you have mentioned in every part of the world that it is happening, there is a long discussion behind this also, because it is not a clash of civilization. It is another point. It is like the war of powers. We can say they are fighting for power. They're fighting for treasuries and mines which these countries have. So I think a clash of civilization, we can say merge of civilizations, I think.
Well, they wouldn't say it, isn't it? They would come to liberate and stuff. You wouldn't have a bad opinion of yourself. And to be honest, at least in some sort of reading, when you look at the world, people look East and West as two different civilizations. This is a Eurocentric approach. This is a European-centric reading of history, because everything on the East is same. So they consider Afghanis, Indians, I'll add, what was that, between Pakistan and India, there was another country emerged from Pakistan or India.
Bangladesh or
Bangladesh, yeah. But I'm specifically adding like really, really different and problematic with each other countries, yeah. And with China, North Korea, Taiwan, for this mindset, it's all Eastern civilization, a very broad brush. It's us and them. So, and then there is a very troubling reading of history. Like, for instance, when the Hellenic Empire was emerged, the first, even before Hellenic, I think it was, the first war between Greece and Trojan, the famous Trojan horse issue. That is a war, the first war between West and East, or the second, I can't remember now, either first or second. And that is how the West deceived East and win the war, okay? And when the Sultan Fatih Mehmet captured Roman capital Istanbul, that is the rebound of that. And when British greatest armada entered in Dardanelles, that is rebound of that. Because the first ship in that armada was Agamemnon, the same Greek king who actually attacked Troya. So in Churchill's mind, it was the same game. We're coming to get our revenge. So for that mindset, it is always us and them. For them, it's Africa. You see, like it doesn't even exist in that us and them. But if it were to exist, it is of course them. It's just a Western thingy. But if they want to take you as an other person and categorize you in all of the rest of the world, and us will have a fight, but then identify Muslims as the main threat among them, let's say. So you have to pay attention. So that actually turned into some reality. If you see the things that I mentioned, 9/11 has nothing to do with Afghanistan, yeah, nothing to do with Iraq and this and that, but all these things happened, unfortunately. And then now we have ISIS because of Iraqi invasion. Basically, everyone agrees that is the power vacuum, and the tortures and everything has led to a new form of terrorist organization that can operate on this level, unlike the others and everything. But it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy if you don't do anything. If someone is preparing, gearing, if they need a conflict to continue, because many people felt like in the absence of a conflict like between Russia and America, the world would be so strange. So they were trying to come up with like what's a bipolar, two-polar system again. So who would you identify? What, the red problem is gone, the green problem is emerging now. Sort of a thing. It's like I don't want to talk about more, but the idea is that okay, some people are talking about this possibility. Dialogue is important in a way to avoid that as well. That's it, I think. If there isn't any other questions.
Anybody else?
So can I go?
Yes, please.
Good morning, doctor. Thank you very much for your presentation. So something I wanted to ask, like as you were going through your presentation, was that does the Gulen understanding of dialogue essentially say that it is applicable to Muslims universally? Because if yes, it says so, then I think I find it slightly problematic, because for a dialogue movement originating in a place like Turkey, where where the entire politics and society is in culture with each other because of their respective understanding of what modernity is and what pre-modernity is. How is it that a dialogue movement originating in a place like Turkey, which is still very much preoccupied, just like you mentioned, with the entire Judo-Christian clashes with the Muslims, is applicable to Muslims which are elsewhere in the world, who haven't been the part of the same battles, aren't originating from the same understanding of history, haven't even taken to Islam in the same manner. So how can there be this universality of this approach to dialogue?
I think first of all, it won't be exactly same within every culture, but the dialogue in essence would be there, because for Islam, for anyone who considers himself as a Muslim, dialogue is a must. Meaning, however you interpret it, the way I specifically make clarify the difference is that any Muslim is responsible to at least spread their religion. Yeah, like you are obliged to do mission in the right word, dawah, the same in Christian term mission, and the Muslim version is dawah. You are supposed to do that. You have to tell people about your religion, especially if they don't know about it and stuff. And if they know about it, the prophetic tradition says that you have to go to them at least 40 times. That is how many times the prophet visited Abu Jahl to convince him, sort of, yeah. Which didn't work out, but he still never give up. Sort of like there is an argument for that, and you can see that argument is very strong and alive in the Muslim world. Here is the Gulen's counter argument comes in a sensible way, I think. If you look around yourself in whichever community you are, do you see anyone can't have access to Islamic sources? Like anyone has a smartphone, would be able to tell you about any hadith that you want to know about, any Quranic source. It's not like we have to print Qurans and send to poor countries, yeah? Well, for Africa, it might be still the case. That's why Saudi are printing a lot of Quran and sending there, because they think that is the first thing needs to go before the food parcel. It should be a copy of Quran, and that's why you can see them. But Gulen says, no, people actually can have the information, can have access to information. But then the second question, now I'm formulating the second question, he didn't put it this way. What is the perception of a Muslim in anywhere in the world nowadays? So I would say it's not a very good perception. Many people now perceive that Muslims are a potential terrorist. It's right or wrong, as a hijab wearing woman, you may easily realize, you may feel uncomfortable. In here, definitely. In UK, my wife wearing hijab feels uncomfortable in certain settings because people look at differently. She hasn't done anything wrong. You know, she's a law-abiding citizen, like all the 99.999% of Muslims. But there is a small minority that has done a lot of stuff, a lot of atrocities, which we condemn as well, and create a lot of problems. And now everyone thinks somehow any Muslim around the world can turn into overnight a terrorist. There is that fear, unfounded but real. You know, people have that fear. Our neighbors have that fear. The way they talk, you can see that fear. It is generated partly. It is like, for instance, if you take a small piece, this is in a room where very small stuff, and put it into very much in the center of attention, you may feel like this is a massive thing. So it is something like that. But you know, that created that fear over the time with the 9/11 and afterwards and everything. And I think engagement in a good way becomes essential. So how you do that? I think we'll find ways according to our cultures, according to our heritage. And I think everyone is doing one way or another dialogue. As I said, like either you engage in a good way or a bad way, or a lack of engagement. In, you know, if you're not looking after your neighborhood, often people say in some parts of Europe where Muslims are living together, let's say, some parts very clean, some parts very dirty, but often it says, oh, they don't look after their neighborhood. So that is a message you are sending out with doing nothing, really, not even doing your garden. You can see in a street when you're driving, if someone's heads are not done in UK, it's not an English person, you know, like it's not the white Anglo-Saxon person. It's probably an ethnic minority. I'm not identifying a certain group, but it's like almost becoming this sort of a negative message by doing nothing, really. So I don't think everyone can take on the same way that Gulen did, because his culture allowed him the non-confrontational history. Gulen didn't come from a, well, Ottomans had a fight, essentially, go against the biggest army in the world and whatever they lost, you know, however, but it wasn't invaded. So there isn't a post-colonial literature there that puts the West as the power that you had to fight to emancipate yourself. I mean, there has been a brief intervention, but in our minds, let's say, the Western powers are not that hostile. So hence, Gulen can make this argument and get a movement formed around it. I don't think it may be possible in everywhere, but I believe, for instance, one of the strongest dialogue movements in Islamic world is Tablighi Jamaat. Whether you like it or not, it's a traditional way of engaging with others and this and that. It's never changed and whatever. It's the most populated movement in the world. So there is actually that. So it's just a different form. Gulen says you don't need to knock on people's door and tell them about a prescribed stuff or read them some. They all have that information. They just want to see it in their eyes that Muslims are actually living up to it. And then when they see, they'll have a good opinion. They'll be convinced and this and that. So he comes up a different way of just formulating it. And that explains, as you said, the cultural heritage allows him to do that, of course. But it doesn't mean Gulen's movement is what, 500,000 people, tops 1 million? How many Tablighi Jamaat congregate? Education-wise and logical, it might be different. a reality. There's a very strong sense of dialogue. It's just slightly different than Gulen. It's a very strong sense of mission, dawah in there, which is a form of dialogue, which is one way, but you know, it's just another form.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Okay.
No. I'm surprised, really. In our previous discussions, we used to have a lot of questions about Turkey and Gulen, and today nobody is asking any question about it.
Hello, sir. I'm Sabiha More. Can you hear? I have a lot of disturbance today because I'm in college. Hello.
Yes.
Are you able to? Are you able to hear? Are you able to hear me? My question to Ismail sir is that is he now based in Turkey right now? Is he based in Turkey? No.
Yes, it is.
Sir, you are based in Turkey right now?
No. He is in the UK.
Acha, he's in the UK. But my whole question is that when you study Fethullah Gulen about dialogue, we find volumes of his work available on the internet. But he still has a problem with the existing head of the state. Why doesn't dialogue work there? My problem is there. He has given so much about dialogue. Can we have something that why does he not come down to have dialogue with Erdogan, Mr. Erdogan, the president of Turkey?
Very good question. I think he, you know, if you look very closely, in my opinion, he tried very hard to not to break the relationship, Gulen, because Erdogan, let's say in his third term especially, was not very, let's say, democratic to stand by with anymore. But he didn't want to part his ways until there was a grave corruption investigation about Erdogan. So at that point, it's like Indonesian prime minister who had a big corruption case against him. For a Muslim scholar in Indonesia to say, well, no matter how much he steals, he's our leader and whatever, it would stop his reputation, like not reputation, his reality. If he were to stand by at that point with him, Gulen would be corrupt as well. So there is a point where Imam Azam, Abu Hanifa, and other scholars where they had to come across with certain authority. In the history, there is very much. He had to just put a distance between him and the politician in question. When he did that, he gave an opportunity to Erdogan to divert, because Gulen is not very much liked by the seculars in Turkey because of his work, non-religious Turks, let's say. So Erdogan took this as an opportunity. I'm trying to tell the story in a different way to explain why it can't be formed now, that sort of a dialogue. Because now the lack of that dialogue means something as well. It's a dialogue. We will read this as a dialogue. We read a lot of stories. We don't remember, but all of the four fiqh schools that dominates the world came out this sort of a dialogue. So that is what Gulen has to endure now. If he can, he will survive. So now, after the fight started, Erdogan used this anti-religious sentiments in the country against Gulen to start the pressure. But in that time, he managed to get rid of the biggest corruption allegations. It worked for everyone. So he formed a new coalition. So he sell out Gulen and had new friends. And they were all happy to persecute this newly rising religious group. And now it can't formulate, because it came to a point, Gulen doesn't have anything to offer in this context. For instance, what I mean is, like, if there was a very strong diaspora criticism about Erdogan, if they were able to create a lot of YouTube channels and this and that and make a lot of noise, there is a chance that Erdogan would sit down and say, what do you want to stop this? That there would be, at the moment, Erdogan can persecute. He canceled everyone's passports. No one can leave the country. No matter how educated you are, you can't get a job and this and that. They're all trapped in Turkey, 90% of people, 80% of people at least. because some people manage to smuggle themselves out. So there isn't any bargaining chip in Gulen's position. The only bargaining chip is if he were to give up in his morality aspect. You know, he says, okay, no matter, you know, it was a misunderstanding, you were never corrupt, you are a good person. If he were to say that, then he would defy his entire philosophical tradition so that he can relieve him. And similar stuff, you know, I don't know how familiar, but some of the audience would be familiar. When the first debates about whether Quran was a created or part of created makhluk or part of Allah and this and that discussion, some Emevi sultans actually persecuted the most well-known scholars. I don't want to name the wrong names, but the founder of Hanafi Madhab was actually remained a very long time in prison. And the Shafis as well, and Imam Malik, they all been persecuted for their beliefs, and they stood up against the political oppression. They never give up. And over a century later, they said, okay, this guy actually stood up and never give up because he really had fear of Allah. So he should be right. That reputation actually come from that, because there was hundreds of faqih giving hundreds of fatwa, and they could have formulated, but they didn't become popular because it didn't pass people's mind. You know, if you can stood up against a small belief about whether Quran is created or part creator, you know, like for this minute issue, if someone serves in prison but didn't change his opinion, then people 50 years later, they say this guy never say anything apart from his fear of Allah. He didn't change his opinion based on political oppression, so we are going to follow him. That's how they become popular in that sense. So the two things: A, Gulen doesn't have anything else to bring this conversation. He has to just persevere. He can't negotiate on the terms that he is standing on now, because it's in a way about corruption. It's about, you know, like if he were to say something, he wouldn't have any more credibility, not now, not in the future. He will be just another guy who bends for the power or for another reason, whatever. And Erdogan holds all the cards. If he needs ever Gulen movement support, he will negotiate. But at the moment, he doesn't have anything, any repercussion. He commits so many crimes, but there isn't any international really outcry or anything that Gulen managed to do. There isn't anything forcing his hand to do any negotiation. And Gulen's position is not in there to offer anything. You know, you can't offer Erdogan what he doesn't have. Apart from you have to give up your integrity. It is very similar. If I were to put in, Socrates was right, but he was condemned to death, and they asked him to say, we are gonna take you, you know, like let us smuggle you out. He said, no, you know, this will be my point. I will drink this poison to make my point that I was right, and I won't give up, and I won't buckle. And he become almost a martyr for anyone who Socrates is a horrible person in many aspects, you know, like it's a prehistoric person, very racist, slavery, you know, if you want to take it that way. But there is a point the guy actually stood up for his principles and paid the ultimate price. And that sometimes befalls on you. There is no room for negotiation that is allowed to you. But it is still a dialogue with other people. In the future, we might be looking at this story and say, we might stand up against this sort of corruption like Gulen did in so and so time, so that our country get rid of all these sort of problems altogether, because it's a crisis, it's going downhill, everything is getting worse. But if there is a chance that things to be stabilized again, we need that sort of figures to actually steadfast in their position, because everyone looks up to them. If he were to bend, we'll all bend, we'll just start changing the rules and everything. He doesn't have that room at the moment.
Sir, my whole idea was not to doubt what Gulen movement is doing and the person who's behind it. The cause is very noble. The idea is very noble. He didn't buckle down under pressure. He really is doing a very good work. My whole idea is that then why does dialogue does not happen? And when in a country a dialogue does not happen, then in society it is very difficult to have dialogue at such a large scale when there are so many people working for his ideas. I understand that there are many followers of Gulen and they're following and they're doing good work, interfaith and other things they are doing. My question is that an entire country has become hostile to one single person and there is no dialogue, right? And I don't know how much you understand Urdu poetry, but for Gulen, I have got these two lines to offer that सितमगरों की अगर भीड़ है तो होने दे, जो अहले हक हैं वो तादाद से नहीं डरते, कि जिसके दिल में मोहब्बत का नूर बसता है, किसी फिरौन और शद्दाद से नहीं डरते. They don't get scared of anybody. So those who are fighting for the good will keep on fighting, but when there is no dialogue, it is stuck. People don't go ahead. People like us who want interfaith dialogue, when look at Gulen, they say, "Arey, ye to khatam ho gaya. This has come to an end. Now what to do?" There is no dialogue. There is no improvement. I mean, this is my observation.
No, I think now I understand a little better. So let me rephrase it, or let me try to put where Gulen probably sees himself at this point.
Yes.
Okay? So what is happening is mainly dehumanizing of the people, denying their very existing. So, for instance, many people within the government now, or because of the government propaganda, because government owns the media privately as well in Turkey, it thinks that Gulen people are not human. That's the main problem. They don't have social rights. They don't have a right to. They don't have right to be represented by solicitors. These solicitors get arrested as well. If Amnesty were to intervene, Amnesty get arrested. These are all happening, you know. So at this scale of dehumanization, it happened in, let's say, in Islamic history, in the very beginning of Islamic history, where you don't have any leg to stand on. Your idea is you have to move out and reestablish yourself somewhere else and come to a point where you can negotiate again. You have to have something in your hand to negotiate. So the Prophet, he had to fled from his country, from Mecca, when all these negotiating channels finished and when they tried to kill him, when they tried to exterminate him, literally. So you actually move out. It's not like he doesn't want to talk, but there is no one to listen. They actually want to kill. So then you have to move out. You have to evacuate, let's say, reestablish somewhere else. Then they want to, of course, finish you off there, just like they are trying to get rid of all Gulenists around the world as well. If you can survive that as well, and then you come to a point where you can make a treaty, you know, like a Hudaybiyah. And if you can survive that, that is the rest is, or you know, that means like you are now parties. They tried to kill you twice, 3 times. It didn't work. You defended. You survived. You remain. Allah helped you. However, then they have to now admit and take you as another human and sign a treaty with you. That's the point where he win the big time. That's why it is the big victory for him. It was a very, very demoting, bad term agreement. Many Muslims didn't want to accept that, but it was the very big victory because they now become equal. In 2 years, everything reversed. And we have seen the glorious Islamic history afterwards, the Mecca fall and everything. So I think he sees himself in that position. He has to steadfast. I think that's where many scholars find themselves in prison, seeing themselves. If they, no matter whether you like or not the Egyptian Sayyid Qutb and stuff, like if you pass that test, that is the outmost test. Said Nursi himself has remained in exile and in prison over 20 years. But that is the time it matters, that if he remains, it's a horrible thing, but eventually they have to reckon with you. They have to take you as another human being, negotiate with you. Then you bring your own merits, morality, and everything into table. Then it changes everything. If you try to do that now, they won't talk to you. They want to kill you, exterminate. You are a threat because your ideas are a threat. You know, there is a system working, bribery and whatever. How dare you try to stop it? All those sort of issues are against you. But if you can remain steadfast, if you can survive, if you can evacuate the way it's been and establish yourself in another position so that you can negotiate, open a dialogue, because dialogue is between equals. For instance, you won't hear Gulen saying anything bad as like vermin, rat, horrible person, and this and that about Erdogan, but Erdogan would be daily speaking of them as non-human stuff like vermin, rats, and viruses, and cancerous, and this and that, like genocidal language, because they don't accept them as a human being. So there is no dialogue without that exception. It has to be mutual in that sense. Once they agree that you have an opinion, okay, we disagree on this issue, let's come and talk, that's a healthy position. Then what Gulen has to say is, okay, go on, do this, have those allegations checked, and we can work together and whatever. It can go a different direction. But at this point, it is a genocidal issue that if he can survive, we will have a successful movement. If he can't, then we'll have a myth. In either way, we will have a legend growing out of it. Gulen's legend will grow out of it. May not be a reality, but in either way, he has to remain his position. Doesn't mean like hostile. I closely follow that. Everyone, I do regular videos about that. It's a careful language. He's aware of the history. He's aware of his options. But there isn't a viable dialogue between someone who wants to exterminate you, and exterminate is like used for animals. That's why I'm specifically using that, because you see, like, no one thinks of if you were to, I'm now specifically choosing, if you were to slaughter a chicken and have a barbecue, you won't think twice about it. You wouldn't think like you have killed something worthy of this and that. It's not. So dehumanization is a very, very strong sense. Once you think humans are like not even chicken, because chickens are lovable, in comparison to rats and vermins and cockroaches, they're like things that you want to stomp on. That is a key thing. There can't be a dialogue between. But if you were to be a big cockroach, let's say a dangerous cockroach, then they would want to, in their mind, you have to be a threat to them to really have a negotiation even. They didn't want to negotiate with the Prophet when he came for Mecca. They had to, because he was powerful. They didn't see him. They said, erase that where it says you are the Prophet. Erase that. We don't accept that. You see, like, they didn't see him as he sees him. They didn't see him equal. They didn't see him, he has rights. But eventually, they realized they can't deny him anymore. And then that changed the whole paradigm. They become equals. The next year, the Mecca had a drought, and the Prophet sent them aid. Like this sort of like, look, I help out, I help you. He sent them food, he sent them dates and stuff. So sort of like you can see the hand changed in there. And that's the dehumanization finished in there, where some Mecca people were trying to kill off all their relatives so that they can kill an idea, couldn't manage that, and they all, I'm not saying it's happening the same, but I am saying we are all going to be tested what we are teaching. For Gulen, what matters is that he acts out what he preached so far. That is the entire test he has to survive. I'm not saying it's like a test of, like this sort of a battle. I'm just saying whatever he's preached, he's now being tested on it. All that non-violent stuff, and this. Gandhi had the same thing. We know Gandhi because actually whatever he was teaching, he was preaching, he actually acted them all out. It's in front of us. It made him what he is. If he were to bend, negotiate, change, not in the sense that his own principles, we wouldn't have Gandhi now. We would have another political leader. It wouldn't be matter for the whole world. It transcends all cultures and languages. I don't know what he means to you, but for someone who just watch a couple of movies or read a couple of articles about him, Gandhi means a lot. It means integrity. It means simplicity. It means, but we don't know really. He had these conversations with Muslims. He had these conversations with British. Many people probably accused him being like so soft and this and that, all sorts of stuff. But all we know now is the guy walked. The guy did, salt and his own clothes and all these things that now means a lot.
Very much, sir. And you are right. Gandhi means a lot to us. I would like you to show this.
Thank you very much.
For us, Gandhi is everything. We follow Gandhi in our college, head to toe, pin to point, everywhere. It's only Gandhi that is. Thank you so much. It was lovely, and congratulations for being a very lovely father too. I heard that you had gone for your child. Thank you very much for taking care of the young ones. We as teachers want parents to get involved. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, Dr. Sezgin, can I take more questions, or do we conclude here? It's up to you.
If there's any, we can have one more maybe, because I promised until 11 at least.
So you're alone with your daughter. So, well, do we have, take one more question, if anybody has one?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes, Mushta.
Dr. Ismail, why is it that we witnessed that in most Muslim majority countries, including Turkey, if there is a kind of a Islamic revivalist movement or a scholar, like we have Fethullah Gulen, or in South Asia, we had Dr. Fazlur Rahman, and now Javed Ghamdi, but they couldn't survive within their own Muslim majority countries and have to take refuge or migrate to West, US or some other places where they could propagate their ideology well. So is it a problem with the Muslim majority countries, or is these Islamic revivalist scholars always in tussle with the regimes? Are Muslim majority countries not tolerant of these new novel ideas or interpretations of Islam? Because we witness it all over, every place. You take the name of Sayyid Qutb, he was sent to gallows. In other scholars, like presently Javed Ghamdi, he had to leave Pakistan. Earlier, Fazlur Rahman left in 1960s and did most of his work in US. So just I intend to know, in case of Fethullah Gulen also, why he had to migrate from Turkey to US.
I think these scholars are early samples of a revival, a real revival. You know, the Quran's the main audience. This is out of topic, so I'm giving a lot of interpretation here. The Quran's main audience is Muslims. The Quran is not for non-Muslims, let's say. You read it if you think that is God's word, let's say. Mainly, I don't think you can read it, you know, as a poetry or something as well. And if you look into it, the biggest warning in the Quran is not do not kill, do not do. It's, you know, it says that. I don't have numbers in front of me. There are good statistics about what Quran says, how many times it says. But one of the biggest problem or issue that Quran warns us is, do not follow your forefathers' religion. It always comes in the context when the Prophet is talking to mushrik idolaters, you know, because they are following forefathers' religions blindly. Why don't you rethink it again? You see, like it was originally, their forefathers' religion was prophetic. It become broken. Why don't you follow the original thing, not your forefathers? Ibrahim alayhi salam built the Kaaba. Why do you fill it up with idols and this and that? That's sort of a question. But if you think about it, why Quran would mention this? Because they are gone. For the rest of our lives, we read them in our prayers and we contemplate about them. Well, what does it tell me? I shouldn't follow my forefather's religion. Why not? My forefather was a Muslim. But he was Muslim for himself, not for me. I should establish a relationship between God and me reading my Quran, because he sent through a messenger to me personally a message to tell me that, Ismail, I created you, for that matter, all of you, Muslim or non-Muslim, I created you as an autonomous ambassador. No one can touch you, no one can harm you. Your life is sacred and this and that, because you're my representative. Now I want things to be done in the world. Okay, here is the instructions, and instructions are things that you should do. They are clear, but also you are, because you are representative, and if any problem starts, people raise their hands to pray me, it means you have to intervene and sort out. That is what an ambassador does, you know, a vice regent does, isn't it? Like Queen's Regent in India is India's ruler. You know, in that sense, regent word is a king. Actually, you are sent here to actually end the hunger, end the problems, make the world like a heaven-like place. And Allah reminded you this with a message and with a very precious messenger give you the thing. But we always take it as something someone else should be doing somewhere. So when they start trying to do something, they all often feel alone, not enough power, not enough support and stuff. So it doesn't turn into a big change. We keep following our father's religion. Luckily, let's say you were born in, let's say, Kashmir or Deoband. Depends on where you're born. You have a specific way of seeing your forefathers' religion, and you're very strict about it. I have, and if you come to any town in Turkey, I will show you where it will be different than others. And you never think, why am I for, I have a message that I have to contemplate and, read and try to understand and implement and change things. But we don't do that. So, and it's very hard to come out from that forefathers' religion and thinking your own and taking matters into your hand. You are actually Allah's Khalifa in the world. You are supposed to stop that hunger and this and that. And so whenever someone comes up, Gulen actually in his youth, he is actually acting like he is the God's agent on the world. He has to do everything. He has to stretch out, go to, if people don't come to mosque, he was an imam and he was supposed to preach. But if they don't come, he would go to them, to stadiums, to coffee houses, to, in culture, almost to pubs, wherever people gather, he would go and talk to them, try to see. He would see students in need of financial help. He'll try to reach out some businessmen to support them. Then all those stuff grow and become a thingy. But we, as a community around him, let's say in Turkey, has seen him as this unique role that he's that responsible. We are not. We just follow. But we actually have to just look around us and solve our problem. Listen in one ear what's happening in the next door if my daughter needs me, or like we have to intervene, just like a father, just like there is a lot of roles and responsibility. And I think that level of personal responsibility, moral responsibility, or individualism has not emerged. We are not ourselves as individuals see ourselves addressed in the Quran by God. We see that as a book sent to Muslims. It's not a book sent to Muslims. It is a book sent to all of individuals with a very valuable prophet. And we have to read it for ourselves and understand and implement. There'll be a lot of mistakes. We'll benefit from previous interpretations. We'll benefit people who know Arabic better. We'll benefit from the historical context that it was given and this and that. But eventually we'll come to a point where, if you think about it, the Prophet, peace be upon him, used to have a lot of trouble understanding why people are acting this way and that and this and that, and and eventually when it befalls on him, it took some time to grasp that idea, but then he followed it through as an individual. If he had given up, he wouldn't have what he has achieved. So I think there is a sense of moral agency we are missing. We should understand that it is not Fazlur Rahman's responsibility or Fethullah Gulen's responsibility. It is also Ismail's responsibility to see what he has, what Allah has given him. Let's say I have a PhD. Yeah, it's something under my belt. People call me doctor. That puts some weight in my words. Okay, then it means what can I do with that knowledge and title? I can share it, of course, and I can improve it and share it, and improve it and share it. And in the issues that I know and whatever, and in that way I can contribute because I am obliged to, as if like I have to protect all this knowledge and spread this knowledge. If I don't, Einstein said once, there is no actually evil in the world. It's lack of good people doing good stuff. Because we are not looking after poor people, we are not solving the hunger and everything. The people are starving. It's not because of Allah. Allah sent millions of people to sort all these problems. They're all looking at each other, and very, very uncharacteristically, I'm having this conversation with Gulen members, the movement members. I'm saying, how do you think this tribulation will end? Like, okay, Muslim world is a big issue. How these troubles in the Gulenist people are suffering at the moment will end? They say, Allah will sort this out. And I say, well, Allah sent a couple of thousands of people to sort this out as his vicegerent regents. Why don't you do it? Well, we are praying. Yes, but let's say you are praying to Allah and he's sending you back to action zone to sort all those problems, because Allah won't come down to sort out. He's not that, he's not your servant. If you ask him pray, he send his vice regents, you don't expect British Queen to come and sort your problem. You write a letter, she sends someone, isn't it? She sends someone to do your plumbing or your roof or whatever you need help. The regent, the God himself won't come down. He'll send agents, and you are that agent. Why don't you solve that problem? But it's a time of crisis and shock and whatever. Not everyone sees themselves individually that important enough to be addressed by Allah. And once you, and in the West, in a different way, for a different reason, people had to establish this importance of human importance in a different way, because of the crisis, because of the kings used to kill people right and left and center and whatever without any this one. And eventually they fought back and get the Magna Carta, establish themselves as worthy beings that has to be taken to court, not killed like with the whim of the king and whatever, and then expanded it. They don't give up, so they preserve their rights and privileges and this and that. That's a different way. That's a way of understanding you are as a human important. But as Muslims, we should be actually seeing that we as individuals, I am as important as it can be, because Allah sent a message 14 centuries ago, so that maybe I will read it and act upon it today. But we don't see it. We actually put it slightly away somewhere else. Some scholars, some Muslim societies, that's us, that's human race, that's we. And very strangely, I'll say this because I'm thinking of this, like the way people, perceive Chinese people almost like subhuman in our mind. You see, it's irrelevant, but I see it relevant in a way that, like, people put certain things in center, but maybe you should put yourself in some issues at the center of the universe, as if like everything is failing because you're not responding it. Okay, not other people are doing this and that and whatever. You see, when you dehumanize yourself, when you forget what it means to be a Khalifa, a vice regent on earth, and then expect others to be that, and then the problems continue. And think about it as AI tests, Dynamo corporations created some artificial intelligence robots, like 20 of us, sent into testing zone, seeing how they are reacting and how they are perceiving. They're getting better and better and better and every day. But eventually they'll have to sort out all their problems. That's the idea of sending a vice regent into an area. If God has to come in and whip everyone into order, share the food among us and this and that, what is the point of sending all these human agents into the scene to bring the peace, to do God's work, to preserve what he has created and make it even more beautiful the way he intended? So I think we are not seeing ourselves, this is in a nutshell, as important as we should see ourselves, as key. Gulen is suffering, let's say, because we are not taking enough responsibility in our shoulders. So as Uyghur people are suffering, so as other Chinese people are suffering in the same authoritarian regime, because we don't see how important we are and how important, how key it should be, how much it is needed individually, our contribution to solve all the world's problems. If we were to see, we might be 1 person, 2 person, 3 person, like then, but the more it grows, the more it will get better. But the more we place that responsibility on somewhere else, on some important scholar's shoulder, the more they will be left alone, because it's their job. No, it's not their job. They are just like you and me, but they happen to know more about religion and they are implementing it. You may know more about computer, you may implement that and dominate the YouTube area with the positive videos, but you let's say all the racist people ranting and polarizing people because you don't produce something positive, and there is more negative out there, and it affects the whole quality of life. It polarizes people, and then we suffer. Why? It comes back to that moral responsibility of the individual, I think.
All right. Thank you so much for answering this question and also for conducting this very interactive and engaging session, Dr. Ismail Sezgin.